The phones didn't just light up in Baton Rouge, they exploded. One commitment flipped, then another. And suddenly, the unthinkable was happening in real time. Kim Mulkey, the loudest voice, the sharpest dresser, the most defiant power broker in women's basketball, was watching elite recruits choose Staley over her not once, but back. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This was a warning shot. Behind closed doors, LSU's recruiting board started to look like a crime scene. Names circled in red, missed calls, staff scrambling, and in Columbia, silence, the most terrifying response of all. Staley didn't gloat. She didn't tweet. She didn't explain. She just kept winning battles without raising her voice. And that made it hurt more. Because this wasn't just about two players picking South Carolina. This was about power shifting, about whispers spreading that recruits were choosing culture over chaos, stability over spectacle, trust over tension, about parents asking different questions, about boosters getting nervous, about a program built on dominance suddenly feeling exposed. Mulkey smiled in public. She always does. But insiders say the mood inside LSU's walls turned icy. Every quote was dissected, every reaction magnified, every loss reframed as a sign of something deeper, cracking beneath the surface. And as the rivalry with South Carolina crossed from the court into the shadows of recruiting rooms and living rooms, one terrifying question started circulating through the Was this just a bad week for Kim Mulkey or the beginning of something she can't control? Kim Mulkey didn't build LSU quietly. She built it loudly, defiantly, and with zero apologies. From the moment she arrived in Baton Rouge, everything about her presence screamed domination, bold outfits, sharper words, a mentality that said LSU wasn't here to participate, it was here to take over. And for a while, it worked. Championships followed, star players followed, cameras followed. The program became must-see TV, not just because of wins, but because of the constant tension that hovered around it. Mulkey sold intensity as a virtue, pressure as a privilege. If you couldn't handle the spotlight, you didn't belong. That pitch attracted a certain type of recruit, fearless, confident, and ready to be thrown into the fire. LSU became the place where stars were made fast, where expectations were immediate, and where patience was not guaranteed. For some players, that was intoxicating. For others, terrifying. On the other side of the SEC, Staley was building something very different. No theatrics, no public shots, no chaos. South Carolina became synonymous with structure, trust, and long-term development. Players didn't just arrive, they grew, they stayed, they won, and more importantly, families trusted the process. Staley's program felt like a fortress, quiet, controlled, and relentlessly consistent. For years, these two worlds coexisted in tension. Mulkey the disruptor, Staley the standard, LSU the loud challenger, South Carolina the established power. Every matchup felt personal. Every recruiting battle felt like a proxy war for the future of women's basketball. But here's what changed. Recruits started paying attention to what happened after the headlines faded. Behind the scenes, whispers began circulating. Stories about pressure boiling over, about roles changing overnight, about the emotional toll of constant scrutiny. Nothing official, nothing provable, just enough smoke to make families pause. Meanwhile, South Carolina's pitch stayed steady. Come here, get better, be protected, be prepared for the next level. No rush, no panic, just development. When LSU won big, the system looked bulletproof. But when cracks appeared, when losses mounted, or chemistry wobbled, the same intensity that once felt empowering started to feel suffocating. And recruits noticed. They noticed how Staley's players spoke about her. They noticed who stayed quiet and who didn't need to say anything at all. So when elite prospects started choosing South Carolina, it wasn't just about basketball fit. It was about emotional safety, about trust, about believing the voice leading you wouldn't turn on you when things got hard. That's what made these decisions sting so deeply in Baton Rouge. It wasn't a talent issue, it was a perception shift. Kim Mulkey has never been afraid of adversity. She thrives on it, but this felt different. This wasn't a loss on the scoreboard. This was a loss in living rooms, in conversations with parents, in moments where recruits asked themselves, not where will I shine fastest, but where will I be supported longest? And as those questions grew louder, one thing became painfully clear. The rivalry wasn't just about wins anymore. It was about identity. And for the first time in years, LSU wasn't fully controlling the narrative. And that realization set the stage for what came next. The moment the second commitment dropped, everything shifted. This wasn't just one elite recruit choosing South Carolina over LSU. This was a pattern. And patterns are what scare power programs the most. Inside Baton Rouge, the reaction wasn't public rage, it was something far more dangerous. Silence, closed doors, emergency meetings that weren't on the schedule, phones buzzing nonstop with the same question whispered in different ways. How did this happen again? Kim Mulkey has built her career on controlling the room, recruits, media, boosters. She's always been the loudest presence, the sharpest voice. But suddenly, she wasn't the one setting the tone. Dawn Staley was, and the most unsettling part wasn't that South Carolina won the recruits. It was why they won them. Behind the scenes, word began to spread that these players didn't just like South Carolina more, they trusted it more. Trusted the development plan, trusted the stability, trusted that one bad game wouldn't redefine their future. That hit LSU like a gut punch, because intensity sells, until it doesn't. Pressure motivates, until it scares people away. The first shocking twist came when insiders revealed that LSU never truly felt out-recruited on paper. Facilities, elite NIL, competitive, exposure, guaranteed. What they lost wasn't leverage, it was confidence from families. Parents asking harder questions, recruits hesitating longer, conversations that used to end with commitments now ending with "we need more time." And then Mulkey spoke. It wasn't an explosion, it wasn't a rant, it was colder than that. Calculated. She made it clear LSU doesn't beg, that they only want players who are built for their standard. On the surface, it sounded like strength. Underneath, it landed like a warning shot, not just to recruits, but to the entire SEC. LSU wasn't changing. Adapt or don't come. That's when the backlash ignited. Social media split instantly. Some fans praised the toughness. Others read it as deflection. Analysts began asking questions they never asked before. Is LSU's culture becoming too rigid? Is the pressure turning from fuel into friction? And most dangerously, is South Carolina now the safer choice for elite talent? Meanwhile, Dawn Staley said nothing, and that silence was deafening. No quotes, no jabs, no victory lap, just another practice, another workout, another quiet win. That contrast made Mulkey's words echo even louder. One coach defending a philosophy, the other letting results speak. Inside LSU's locker room, the tension was impossible to ignore. Current players saw the headlines. They heard the chatter. They felt the shift. When recruits choose elsewhere, it doesn't just affect the future, it shakes the present. Questions creep in. Am I valued? Am I replaceable? Is this place still building forward, or just holding ground? Boosters noticed too. Recruiting momentum is currency, and momentum had stalled. Not collapsed, stalled. And for a program that thrives on dominance, even a pause feels like a threat. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't LSU versus everyone. It was LSU under pressure. The shocking truth began to crystallize. This wasn't about losing two players. It was about losing control of the story. For the first time, Mulkey wasn't the disruptor. She was the one reacting. And in modern college basketball, perception moves faster than reality. As the dust settled, one thing became clear: this rivalry had entered a new phase. Not loud, not flashy. Psychological, strategic, personal. South Carolina wasn't just beating LSU on the court anymore. They were beating them in trust, patience, and long-term vision. And as the SEC watched closely, one uncomfortable question lingered in the air. Was this just a recruiting hiccup, or the first crack in LSU's armor? What happened next is where this story stopped being about recruiting, and started feeling like a power struggle, slipping out of control. Within days of the commitments, LSU's internal temperature skyrocketed. Practices got sharper, voices got louder. Expectations that were already sky-high suddenly felt suffocating. Players didn't need reporters to tell them something was off. They felt it in the air. When elite recruits choose another program, coaches say it doesn't matter, but everyone inside a locker room knows the truth. It always matters. And then came the second twist, the one nobody expected. Behind the scenes, word leaked that multiple LSU targets quietly pulled back communication after watching how the situation played out publicly. Not because of South Carolina, not because of NIL, but because of tone. Recruits talk, parents talk more. And what they were saying was alarming. LSU felt intense, but unstable, demanding, but unpredictable, powerful, but emotionally volatile. That narrative didn't come from Dawn Staley. It came from watching Kim Mulkey defend her program in a way that sounded less like confidence and more like a line drawn in the sand. To some recruits, it read as accountability. To others, it sounded like, if you struggle here, that's on you. And in an era where players want empowerment alongside discipline, That perception is deadly. The escalation didn't stop there. National analysts began reframing the rivalry in real time. Not LSU versus South Carolina, but Mulkey versus Staley. Pressure versus patience. Fire versus foundation. One coach demanding immediate excellence, the other promising growth through structure. Suddenly, recruits weren't just choosing schools, they were choosing philosophies. That's when the second major twist dropped. Sources close to the recruiting world revealed that South Carolina didn't even have to push for these wins. They didn't negative recruit, they didn't sell fear, they didn't mention LSU at all. They simply asked one question over and over again. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? That question changed everything, because while LSU sells urgency, win now, perform now, deliver now, South Carolina sells continuity. And in a sport where one injury, one slump, or one bad stretch can flip a narrative overnight, that difference matters more than ever. Inside LSU's fanbase, the response was emotional and fractured. Some doubled down, defending Mulkey with loyalty bordering on defiance. Others quietly admitted what they didn't want to say out loud. This doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore. Every lost recruit now felt amplified. Every South Carolina win felt heavier, and every Mulkey press appearance was dissected frame by frame, word by word, tone by tone. The margin for error had vanished. Meanwhile, Dawn Staley remained unmoved. No statements, no interviews addressing LSU, just practices, development, and another recruiting cycle moving forward like clockwork. That calm became its own weapon, because when one side is visibly bracing for impact, and the other looks completely at ease, perception chooses a winner before the scoreboard does. And here's the part that sent shockwaves through the SEC. A respected recruiting analyst openly suggested that LSU's biggest challenge right now isn't talent acquisition, it's trust retention. Recruits aren't doubting Mulkey's ability to win. They're questioning whether losing, struggling, or evolving under her system comes with too high a cost. That comment hit Baton Rouge like a lightning bolt, because Mulkey's identity has always been built on control, intensity, and edge. But college basketball is changing. Players want structure and security, pressure and patience. And if LSU doesn't adjust how it communicates that balance, the escalation won't stop with 2 recruits by the end of the week. The narrative had fully flipped. This wasn't about South Carolina stacking talent. This wasn't about one recruiting cycle. This was about whether LSU's dominance model still fits the modern era. And as the spotlight tightened, one question grew louder with every passing day. Would Kim Mulkey double down on the pressure, or would the pressure finally force her to change? The fallout didn't creep in quietly, it exploded across the sport like a live wire snapping in a rainstorm. Within hours, social media turned into a battlefield. LSU fans went into full defense mode, flooding timelines with highlights, championship banners, and reminders of Kim Mulkey's resume. One recruiting cycle doesn't erase rings, they shouted. But the louder they yelled, the more obvious the nerves became, because confidence doesn't usually need to be screamed. On the other side, South Carolina fans didn't celebrate loudly at all, and that silence was devastating. No gloating, no trash talk, just reposts of commitments, photos of Dawn Staley smiling in practice, and one recurring phrase that kept trending: culture chose culture. That line cut deeper than any insult. National media jumped in immediately. Debate shows stopped asking who won recruiting and started asking something far more dangerous. Is Kim Mulkey losing control of the narrative? Analysts dissected her press conferences with surgical precision, her tone, her pauses, her choice of words. What once read as fire now sounded, to some, like defensiveness wrapped in authority. Former players weighed in carefully, but pointedly. A few praised Mulkey's intensity, calling it the reason championships exist. Others hinted that not every elite player thrives under that microscope. The message wasn't accusatory, but it was unmistakable. Greatness comes at a price, and not everyone wants to pay it the same way. Inside recruiting circles, whispers grew louder. Parents began asking tougher questions. Not about minutes, not about NIL, about support, about how players are treated when they struggle, about what happens when the spotlight turns unforgiving. Those conversations don't show up on commitment graphics, but they decide everything. The emotional impact hit LSU's locker room. Players were asked about the recruiting losses every time they touched a microphone. Some brushed it off, others looked visibly uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and reality. When teammates are constantly defending the program's image, it becomes exhausting. Winning covers cracks, but scrutiny finds them fast. Meanwhile, Dawn Staley's program absorbed the moment like it was routine. Players spoke calmly. Recruits spoke confidently. South Carolina looked steady. And in moments of chaos, steadiness becomes magnetic. The public began framing this as more than rivalry. It became symbolic. Mulkey represented pressure, intensity, expectation. Staley represented patience, trust, sustainability. Neither is wrong, but the modern athlete is watching closely. By week's end, headlines shifted again. Is the SEC entering a philosophical divide? Are recruits choosing development over dominance? Has the power dynamic quietly shifted? Each article added weight. Each segment tightened the spotlight, and through it all, Kim Mulkey felt it. You could see it in how carefully she chose her words, how often she referenced culture, how firmly she reiterated LSU's standards. Because when a coach starts repeating the same message, it's not just reassurance, it's reinforcement. The emotional fallout wasn't just external. It was internal pressure turning inward. LSU boosters began asking questions, not panicked ones but curious ones. Why now? Why South Carolina again? Why this narrative? And when donors start asking why, programs listen. What made the moment truly volatile was this. No one had officially lost anything yet. No games, no titles, no seasons. And still, it felt like something important had cracked, because perception in college basketball doesn't wait for March. It builds in June, grows in July, and hardens by signing day. And right now, perception was shifting in real time. The public wasn't turning on Kim Mulkey, but they were watching her differently. Less fear, more scrutiny, less assumption, more questions. And as the noise grew louder, one truth became impossible to ignore. This fallout wasn't fading. It was setting the stage for something far bigger. Just when it felt like the dust was settling, the story took a turn nobody inside women's basketball was ready for. Behind closed doors, the conversation around Kim Mulkey stopped being about recruiting losses and started being about leverage. Sources close to SEC circles began whispering the same unsettling idea. This wasn't just about Dawn Staley winning 2 battles. It was about the balance of power shifting faster than anyone expected. And the scariest part for LSU wasn't what South Carolina gained, it was what recruits started questioning. Because, here's the twist, no one wanted to say out loud. Elite players weren't rejecting LSU, they were pausing recruiting. Insiders quietly admitted that several top prospects, not publicly tied to LSU or South Carolina, had started asking different questions on visits. Not about championships, not about facilities, but about voice, about freedom, about what happens when pressure turns personal. That's when the narrative cracked. Wide open. Kim Mulkey has always thrived on confrontation. It's part of her legend, rings forged in fire, players hardened by expectation. But in this new era, where athletes hold NIL power, social platforms, and options beyond basketball, that same fire suddenly looked heavy. And recruits noticed. Meanwhile, Dawn Staley didn't adjust her messaging at all. And that was the most dangerous move of all. No comments, no subtle jabs, no victory laps. South Carolina's silence wasn't confidence anymore, it was control. Then came the moment that sent shockwaves through coaching circles. A respected analyst dropped a quiet but devastating line on a national podcast. If I'm a 5-star today, I don't ask who wins more, I ask who lasts longer. That sentence lit a fuse. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't LSU versus South Carolina. It was old power versus new power, intensity versus longevity, fear-based respect versus earned trust. And Kim Mulkey found herself standing at the center of a debate she never asked for, but couldn't escape. Insiders revealed that LSU's staff had already adjusted its recruiting approach, more relationship-focused, more long-term messaging, less edge in early conversations. That alone told the story. Programs don't pivot unless they feel pressure, and Mulkey felt it, not publicly, not emotionally, but strategically. Because here's the final twist. Kim Mulkey doesn't lose wars, she escalates them, sources say. LSU is preparing a recruiting counterpunch aimed directly at South Carolina's future pipeline. Not one player, not two, an entire class built around players who want intensity, crave accountability, and feed off confrontation. A statement class, a response class. If it lands, the narrative flips overnight. If it doesn't, the whispers get louder. And hovering over all of this is the one reality no one can ignore. When 2 of the most powerful women in basketball stop competing quietly, the sport changes. Permanently. Dawn Staley isn't backing down. Kim Mulkey isn't retreating, and recruits are watching every move. This wasn't a signing day story. This wasn't a soundbite. This was the opening chapter of the next era. Because the next time LSU and South Carolina meet on the court, on the trail, or in March, this moment will be remembered. Not for who spoke louder, but for who forced the other to adapt, and the real question heading into the next cycle isn't who won this round, it's who blinks first. If you felt that tension tighten in your chest while listening to this story, you're not alone, because what's happening right now in women's basketball is bigger than wins and losses. This is about power shifting in real time, and you are watching it happen from the front row. Now, it's your turn to step into the conversation. Do you believe Kim Mulkey's intensity is still the edge that builds champions, or has the game changed so much that Dawn Staley's calm control is the new blueprint for dominance? Is this just a temporary recruiting swing, or the beginning of a long-term power shift in the SEC that could redefine women's college basketball for years? Drop your take in the comments. Don't hold back. This rivalry thrives on debate, and if you want to stay ahead of every recruiting shock, locker room power move, and behind-the-scenes battle shaping this sport, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. These stories don't break on box scores, they break in moments like this. Because the next commitment, the next quote, the next silence from either side could flip the narrative overnight. And when that moment hits, you'll want to already be here. You'll want to already be here.